I was in Florida when the world went crazy. And on March 17th, 2020, I fled the hot zone in my mother's Ford Eclipse, packed to the gills with my mother and my grandson Jonah, my granddaughter Emily, and all the dry goods we could carry. We didn't know how long my mother was coming north with us, but we knew it would be a while, so we had like toilet paper in the cup holders and boxes of macaroni and cheese underneath the spare tire. Anything that wouldn't rot came with us. The only thing we couldn't fit in that Ford Eclipse was my 105-year-old grandma Sylvia. The decision was made that she would be safest staying in her assisted living community, and we left her there. I kissed her goodbye at her front door, and I left knowing that I might never see her again. But the thing about having someone in your life that old is that you know they can't live forever, but all your experience up until that moment tells you they just might. I am the oldest of my grandmother's 4 grandchildren, and I am her favorite. I am crazy about her, and she is crazy about me. My whole life, people have used words to describe my grandmother like firecracker and pistol, and she is all those things. The woman worked until she was 95. She smoked until she was 99, and she had to give it up to move into the assisted living. She still gambles. She carries a long horseshoe in her walker, and she uses it when she plays poker to rake the table. And she still drinks. Each and every day, my grandma has a cocktail, one cocktail, but it's a doozy. She pulls out a handle of this pub club scotch, and she fills a glass and floats a single ice cube in it and gets kind of trashed before dinner. And I am weeping as I drive north, but I also know that if we had both understood what was happening, she would have said to me, take your mother, take your children, keep everyone safe, don't worry about me. This is little comfort as the months drag on. We get in the habit of calling her every Sunday. She is in her apartment with a paid caregiver named Jewel, because they're allowed to have their aides there. And it's only Grandma and Jewel and these 4 walls. They're not allowed to go from apartment to apartment and see their friends. There's no poker, there's no bingo. We sense her hearing is getting less, and she's confused a lot. She'll say to me, is your mother with you? Are you in Connecticut? And we start passing messages back and forth through Jewel. It goes on like this until one Sunday morning in June when Jewel calls and she says Grandma has fallen and EMS is on the way and she's gonna have to go to the hospital by herself. And we wait for several terrible hours until the doctor calls and he tells us that she's alive, but she needs surgery. She's broken her hip. And it is unimaginable that they're gonna operate on this old body. Her skin tears if you hug her too tight, and they're gonna cut her. But he tells us that without the surgery, she'll be in pain and it'll never get better. And we don't know what to do. And in a Hail Mary play the next morning, I call the nurse's station and I ask the nurse to put the phone by her ear. And a little miracle happens and the clouds part. And for just a few minutes, she's fully lucid and she can hear me. And I say to her, Grandma, here's the situation. I explain everything and I say, tell me what to do. And she asks a question. She says, without the operation, I won't get out of bed again? And I say, no, but it might kill you. And she says, but I won't get out of bed again. And I say, no. And she says, I don't want that. She says, you tell them to do the operation. And we do. And they do. And it seems like things have gone pretty well. There's discussion about moving her to rehab when it's over. But it's pretty clear pretty quickly that that's all folly. She's not going to rehab, and she's not going back to her apartment. And from Connecticut, my mother starts to make plans to empty out a bedroom at her own home in Boynton Beach that Grandma can come and we can put in a hospital bed and Jewel can live there. And we know we need to get to her, COVID or not. So we buy a couple of one-way tickets, and I stop on the way to the airport to buy Grandma a present. I stop at the liquor store and I get a couple of nips of Johnny Walker Black. This is an upgrade from her usual pub club. And I know as I buy it, I'm making this kind of scene happen in my own head. It's as if before this scene has happened, it's already a memory that I have scripted and I've purchased props for, because as we're on the way to the airport, we get a call from a social worker who tells us that they have a space for Grandma in a hospice center. And this is good because we'll be able to visit her there, but don't sweat it. It's just temporary. It's just transitional. It doesn't always mean what you think it means. And okay, so we're going to do this. So we get on the plane. We have to change planes in Baltimore. We get on the next plane. And by the time we get to Fort Lauderdale, we go straight to the hospice and straight to Grandma. And as soon as I walk in this room, I know what's going on. This isn't temporary, and this isn't transitional, and I don't know when the end is coming, but after all this time, it is bearing down on us, getting ever closer. Grandma's asleep, and I settle into a chair, and my mother settles into a chair, and a couple hours later, she wakes up, and I go to her side, and I say, Grandma, it's me, hi, I'm here, and she says, Terry? And I say, yeah, it's me. And she says, I'm thirsty. And now is my moment, right? So I pour some of this Johnny Black into a plastic cup, and I take a plastic teaspoon and I spoon some into her mouth. And she starts to cough and to sputter and to gag. And she says, it burns. And this is not as I have scripted it at all. And I sit back down, and Grandma goes back to sleep. The next morning, the music therapist comes and Grandma sleeps through that, and the nurses come in and out, and things are shutting down. Later in the afternoon, Grandma wakes up, and the miracle happens again. She looks right at me. She sees me, which is incredible because her glasses are on the night table with her hearing aids and her dentures and her rings. But she sees me. And she says, Terry? And I say, hi, Gram. And she says, where am I? And I say, you're in a hospital, Grandma. I said, it's hospice. Do you know what that is? And she says, do I know what that is? Yes, I know what that is. And I started to cry. And she says, I'm thirsty again. And this time, when I pour the Johnny into the glass, I say to her, Grandma, I say, I have scotch. And she goes, you have scotch? And I say, yeah. You want some? It's happy hour. She goes, yeah. And I water the Johnny down a lot. And instead of using a spoon, I use this thing they have in hospice rooms. It's like a little sponge on a lollipop stick. And I dip the sponge into this mixture and I put it in her mouth. And she takes a big draw and she swallows and she looks at me and goes, again. And I dip it again and I put it in her mouth and she takes this big suck on the sponge again. And this time she smacks her lips and she sighs out loud. And for just a minute, that dim, quiet room is neither dim nor quiet, as my mother and my grandmother and I burst into laughter, because it is so her. And then we quiet down again, and I start to cry. I'm so sad. And she looks at me and she says, what are you crying? She goes, I'm only dying. And she says, knock it off. She says, no crying. She says, instead, you remember this minute. You remember that I was laying in this bed and I was dying, and we laughed, you and me and your mother. And you tell them all that story, she says to me. And you tell them that family is the only thing that matters, and that after I'm gone, the love will still be there. And she goes back to sleep. And it takes about a day and a half, and she just quietly slips away. And we make the phone calls, and we have this weird Zoom funeral that is not what anybody expected. And a year later, I'm left with nothing but her ring on my finger and a lifetime of memories. And the last one is not the memory that I thought I'd make for us together. The last one is the memory that she made for us in that quiet, dim room. And now every day when I have my cocktail at happy hour, my one and only one, I think of my grandma, and I know she's right. The love, it stays behind. Thank you.